Executive Council's Chris Pappas, who will talk about the top issues facing the state. Be sure to watch C-SPAN's Washington Journal, live at 7 Eastern Wednesday morning. Join the discussion. And we take you live now to Gaithersburg, Maryland for debate in that state's 6th District House race. The event being hosted by the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington. The incumbent John Delaney not running for re-election. He is running for president in 2020. The contestants tonight, Democrat David Trone, Republican Amie Hoeber. Live coverage on C-SPAN.
You're kidding me, right?
Good evening, everyone. Good evening and welcome. I'm Jacob Blumenthal. I have the honor of serving as the rabbi here at Shaarei Torah here in Gaithersburg. The Jewish people read the first 5 books of the Bible, what we call the Torah, on an annual cycle. And this week, our portion opens with our patriarch Abraham sitting outside his tent when he sees 3 men approaching him. And he immediately invites them to stay. He washes their feet, invites them to a meal, and he and his wife Sarah engage in radical forms of hospitality. This theme of hospitality, of welcoming strangers and extending kindness, permeates these early stories of the Bible and the Jewish family. It's therefore fortunate that we here at Shaarei Torah have the opportunity to welcome so many different members of the broader community to our synagogue this evening. We're honored to have so many wonderful guests, our esteemed candidates who represent such diverse points of view, and our JCRC sponsors, as well as those viewing us live this evening on C-SPAN. My prayer this evening is that we will extend Abraham and Sarah's spirit of hospitality to one another, that we will learn from and embrace one another in all our diverse opinions, as we prepare to engage in the gift and responsibility bestowed upon us as citizens of this great nation and vote in the election just a few days from now. Many thanks to all who made this evening possible, and a warm welcome to everyone. And it's a pleasure to turn things over to Mitch Gurachow, the Maryland Commission co-chair for the Jewish Community Relations Council, for some brief remarks of welcome.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi. Well, good evening. As you just heard, my name is Mitch Gurachow. It's my pleasure to serve as one of the co-chairs of the Maryland Commission for the Jewish Community Relations Council. On behalf of the JCRC, I'd like to welcome you to our Congressional District 6th General Election debate. The JCRC of Greater Washington is the public affairs and community relations arm of the Jewish Federation of Greater Washington, representing over 100 Jewish organizations and synagogues throughout Maryland, D.C., and Virginia. The JCRC focuses on government relations, Israel advocacy, intergroup relations, and social justice. Thank you for joining us here tonight to listen and hear from our 4 candidates for Congress as they answer important questions for the Jewish community and our community at large. Next, I'd like to introduce JCRC's Director of Maryland Government Relations and Community Relations, Meredith Weisel, who will be moderating tonight's debate. Thank you.
Oh, I'm on. Okay. It is working. Good evening, everyone. So first, thank you to Shari Torah for hosting us tonight for what we hope will be an informative discussion on some very important issues to the Jewish community in Montgomery County. Just to remind everyone, we actually are live right now on national television. C-SPAN is here. So if you were going to do anything weird tonight, may not want to. So if your friends at home are watching, just pay attention. So first, I just want to thank all the candidates for participating tonight. And just as a reminder, I've given them all of the rules ahead of time, but I'm going to go through them real quick. So one, the questions tonight will not be from the audience. We've compiled a compilation of issues, the questions that were submitted by those who registered ahead of time. And there are several different topics that we're going to go through. Since we're limited on time, my hope is that each candidate will be able to answer each question, but we may switch things around as we see how we get fast through the answers. So just so you know, if a question is not asked tonight, also feel free, and I'm sure the candidates would be willing to talk to you after, before everybody leaves, if you have any specific questions, or feel free to talk to the campaigns after tonight. So for the format this evening, each candidate is going to be allowed a 3-minute opening statement and a 2-minute closing statement. We have picked the order ahead of time blindly, not by myself. We have another JCRC staff person who picked the names out of a hat. Actually, I think it was a bowl we used. And so there is an order for the opening and for the closing. I'll go through that in a minute. So some of you may get one question, others may get another. It's just going to depend on the timing. Your responses to the questions are going to be between 2 and 3 minutes. I will let you know ahead of time whether it'll be 2 minutes or 3 minutes. Most questions will be 3 minutes. A rebuttal will be, wow, okay. A rebuttal will, where's Jacob? I don't know how to turn it down. Okay. A rebuttal will be 30 seconds when your name is mentioned only by another candidate as a counter to an argument that you may have already been referenced in, and you only get 30 seconds, so just keep that in mind. In the front, Nirma is going to be timing. She has signs that will tell you when you have 1 minute left, when you have 30 seconds, and when you have a big old stop sign. So please, please, please stay to the time limit. We look forward to a productive and respectful discussion this evening. And before I start, I just also want to make sure that I acknowledge the JCRC's Executive Director, Ron Hoeber. Stand up. So with that, we're going to start with opening statements. And the order for opening statements will be Mr. Trone, then Mr. Gluck, Ms. Hoeber, and then Mr. Caldwell. And just to keep in mind, the closing statements, which I will remind you at the end, will be Ms. Hoeber, Mr. Gluck, Mr. Caldwell, and then Mr. Trone. So with that, we're going to start with Mr. Trone for a 3-minute opening statement when you're ready, and Nirma will start the clock.
Okay, fantastic.
You ready? All right.
Get that volume moderated right. Well, thank you to the JCRC. Thank you very much. And Meredith, thank you. And also thank you to Washington Jewish Week for their endorsement. We appreciate that very much. And today we got a great surprise again, another endorsement by the Washington Post. Well, what's our campaign been all about? It's been all about civility, compassion, and competence for the next generation. That's where we have to focus. When we talk about civility and you talk to folks all around the district, it's crystal clear they're fed up with what's happening in Washington. They're tired of it. They want government to work for them. They don't want government to work at cross purposes. They want the parties to talk to each other civilly and respectfully and work together. And that's what we've been talking about, and that's the message we're going to continue to work with. My background is I grew up on a chicken and an egg farm. Unfortunately, my father's farm failed. It went bankrupt. And the banks took our home. So we started over with zero. And only in America can you build a business that now is in 22 states. And our success is due to the 7,000 folks that work for us. Our success is due to the education we're able to get in America on student loans that you could actually pay back then, not like today. But our 7,000 team members, key is great benefits. Health care for everybody. Everyone has to have health care. Retirement, partner benefits, free GED, and a college program. So we've been working hard to take care of our people, and if we take care of our people, they take care of the customer. The other piece is compassion. We've got to drive compassion. 72,000 folks died of opioids last year. We've got to get health care for everybody. And we certainly have to figure out how to get the children at the border not to be split from their parents. Philanthropy can do a lot, but at the end of the day, it can't move the needle like government can. That's why I've entered government. We're not taking PAC money, we're not taking lobbyist money, because that's the wrong thing to do. We're here for the people. Competence is the last piece. We need folks in government to understand how to get things done, understand how to work with others, understand that we need long-term thinking for medical research, doubling the budget NIH, fixing the opioid crisis, 72,000 people died, and education, pre-K, community college, technical school, it has to happen, free. But at the end of the day, we want to celebrate the values to come along. And that's what Bobby Kennedy said, how we can make the world a better place. That's why we're here, for the next generation.
Okay. Mr. Gluck?
Thank you to JCRC and you, Meredith, as well. I'm here tonight, we'll talk about platform issues later. I'm here tonight to ask you all, and anybody listening out there who's in Congressional District 6 watching, I'm here to ask you all to vote for a Democrat on November 6th, but not the one that has a capital D in parentheses after his name. In 1968, I registered to vote for the first time, and I registered as a Democrat because there was then a Congress that passed and a president that signed legislation for voting rights, for civil rights, for anti-poverty, and I felt very comfortable being a Democrat. I continued to be so and vote so through the 60s, 70s, 80s, and the beginning of the 90s. In 1992, I gave then Governor Clinton time and money during his campaign because of things he had done for education in Arkansas. But by 1996, when he signed NAFTA, I felt I was abandoned by the Democratic Party. And I think many of you probably feel the same way. I know lots of youngsters do. And so I looked around in 1996, and I found the Green Party, which was then, and is still now, the 1968 Democratic Party. So again, I ask that you vote for a Democrat on November 6th. That Democrat will have a G after his name on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hoeber?
Hi, my name is Amie Hoeber, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm running and what I'm standing for. Thank you all very much for this third forum in our series of forums for Congressional District 6, and I'm delighted all the candidates are here tonight. I'm a mother, a stepmother, and a grandmother. I've raised 5 stepsons and 1 son of my own. I understand the traumas that families go through. I'm also a small business owner. I know what it takes to start and grow a small business. I'm a taxpayer, and I'm vehemently opposed to the concept of higher taxes than we have today. That would destroy not only our county, but the economic benefits that this administration has brought to this country. I'm also an advocate for women. I have served for more than a decade as a board member of the House of Ruth, Maryland, and my husband and I are donors to that organization. I'm also a national security expert. I have devoted my entire career to protecting this country from threats outside and inside. And I stand by that work. I've published 6 books on the subject, and I have worked for the government and industry. I was Deputy Undersecretary of the Army. and I received the highest award that is given for that position, the Distinguished Civilian Service Medal. Why is this important? Because my government experience has taught me how to make government operate, how to make government operate for the people, how to get government resources allocated to important problems, and how to work the system for the benefit of my district. I'm an independent thinker. In addition to that, I have never been a partisan. I have not ever been a partisan follower of any particular ilk. I have stood up to presidents that I have worked for when I disagreed with them. I have stood up to other administrations when I disagree with them, both Republican and Democrat. I'd also like to say, and we'll get into it later, I'm sure, that I'm also an ally for Israel. I've not only talked the talk, but I've walked the walk. I've worked with them for years. Finally, I know this district. I know this district better than any other candidate here. I have spent 4 years walking the streets, talking to people, and listening to people. I know the officials. I've been endorsed by most of them throughout the district. I know the problems, and I know how to address them. I am looking forward to being the representative to help this district as well as to deal with the national issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Make sure the button is on. Is it green?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. You're all set, Mr.
Good
Caldwell.
evening, everyone. My name is Kevin Caldwell, and I am the Libertarian candidate for the 6th. I apologize if you have not heard of me before. I live in Brunswick, Maryland, and I have a background from the United States military, and I work in the Department of Defense industry and satellite communications network. One thing, however, I am not is one of the millionaires from outside the district who can afford a multi-million-dollar Madison Avenue style advertising campaign to sell you a political image or product, and that's exactly what you're being sold. And we have been sold this for decade after decade. My wife is a surgical nurse at the President's Hospital. We are just two middle-class citizens. I have never been in politics before, and I had decided to enter politics because I have been around the world. I've lived in foreign countries as a legal immigrant and even as an illegal immigrant. And some of them I won't name so they don't come after me. But I've also worked as a legal documented worker in a foreign country, and I have been deployed to the front lines in both Iraq and Afghanistan, and have served as a civilian for over 3.5 years in those war zones. I am the only candidate sitting in front of you that is a decorated post 9/11 veteran. I'm the only candidate who has had desert sand in their boots and has faced this enemy that we face both in Israel and worldwide, this terrorist threat. I'm the one who's looked it into the eyes directly and fought it on the front lines. The reason that I have stepped up and run for Congress is, for decade after decade, the ruling class, the establishment of DC, both Democrats and Republicans, have bent their wills not to serve you and I or our interests. What they bent them to serve is the agendas of their true paymasters, from Wall Street, K Street, Defense Street, every street in the nation but Main Street. If we do not, the real issue of this election is, can we not in the 6th District have common citizens that represent our interests, the actual people's interests, because they have not been represented in Congress for decades, nor will they if you elect either one of the Democrat or Republican establishment candidates. That will not happen. We can come back here in 2 years and have the same exact conversation. What I offer is someone who is not owned in any way, or from a party who is owned in any way by any special interest. And I'm not a millionaire, so I'm not doing that out of the fact that I'm my own lobbyist, so I don't need to take their money. But the real issue of this election, no matter what the exact issue, healthcare or anything else, is whether we truly believe in our capacity for self-governance, or whether we are ready to abandon the ideas of the American Revolution and admit that a little intellectual elite in a distant capital can run our lives better for us than you and I can run them ourselves. Yes.
Thank you. So the first subject that we're going to start with is a couple of questions related to security, safety, fighting hatred and bigotry, and the financial needs of our Jewish and other faith-based institutions. I'm going to give you sort of a little background, and then I'm going to ask a series of questions, and then I will tell you which order we're going to go in. So for the past 2 years, and there was actually a recent Baltimore Sun article that just came out the other day, it has marked the largest increases in anti-Semitic incidents in nearly 40 years. Our own synagogue here that we're in, my synagogue, was actually vandalized a few years ago. We've seen hate and bias crimes against minority and other ethnic groups throughout the country, and very much so here in Montgomery County. The Bender JCC in Rockville had a bomb threat, the Charles E. Smith Jewish Day School received a bomb threat, and just recently, our JCC in Northern Virginia, which I realize is not in this district, but I think it's relevant to understand, for the second time in just about a year time period, was vandalized with swastikas. So my question to you is, how should the federal government respond to hate and bias related crimes? And what steps would you take as a congressperson to foster a county and a nation that is safe and welcoming to all of our residents? So why don't we start with Mr. Caldwell, and we'll just go down the line for this time. And there'll be 3 minutes to answer the question. And I'm happy to repeat anything.
Could you repeat the last
Sure.
two
So
parts?
the question essentially is, how should the federal government respond to hate and bias related crimes? So you as a congressperson, what steps would you take to foster our county and nation that is safe and welcoming to all of our residents?
Okay. You can hear me okay? All right.
Yep.
At the federal level, the most important thing your congressman can do, because it's one of the things that actually adds to this, is the divisiveness between us as Americans. There was a famous American that once said that the actual key to peace, whether it be individual peace, peace between households, neighbors, communities, or nations, the key to that peace is we must examine our own attitudes and our own selves to find out what our own blocks to peace are. Because peace in all of this, past everything, is the most important issue in our time. But a lot of the problem that we face now through this divisiveness is not accidental. It is to pit one group of people against another people. Team red, team blue. It's all about everything of breaking us down into certain individuals identified by everything, the one thing that's the most important thing that we have in common. No matter if we rise up to the heights of liberty or sink down into the depths of despotism, folks, we will meet our fates together as Americans. So to reach across that, to foster this non-pitting one group of Americans against another group of Americans is one sure way at the federal level that we can cut through this divisiveness. The true law enforcement aspect comes of it in the local communities. So we can pass certain legislations to make the punishments more severe or the requirements more strict, but in the end of the day, that is going to be applied here at the local level. And more importantly, and this is what you will see, it's the example. The Congress people, me as your congressman, I will lead by example, not telling you with words, but actually coming out into the communities. I have offered to put both a Democrat, Republican, and a Green Party individual on my staff. I am the one candidate. I do not care what party you are from, what group you represent. If it is for a cause that is in the best interest of we, the people in the 6th Congressional District, you will have my support. I don't care if you're a Democrat. I do not see the American people that way. Democrat, Republican, black, white, any kind of way you want it. We are all human beings and fellow citizens of one another. And the true answer starts between our attitudes towards one another and fostering that through example. Thank you.
Ready? Ms. Hoeber?
Okay? I think the key thing one can do as an elected official is to denounce bigotry, to denounce discrimination, to lead not only by example but by statements. I oppose discrimination of any group based on gender, based on religion, based on sexual preference, based on color, based on age, based on weight. There are lots of things for which people are discriminated against, and I believe they're all bad. And I think that we should start off by teaching children how to accept all sorts of things and other people. Now let me talk for a moment about a specific study that was reported in the Washington Post a few days ago. There was an experiment done at a school where they integrated sports teams of able children and disabled children, and they kept them that way for several years. And what that resulted in was an immense improvement in the toleration of other people's differences. And I think if you start with children, children are not born being bigoted. I think now to attack the current bigoting that is done by adults here in this country is going to be hard, but I think you do it both by example and you do it by education. We even have adult education that needs to be done in this respect, in synagogues, in churches, in mosques. All of these people need to be taught that this is unacceptable. There was an incident in Loudoun County today. I don't know if you all have read about it yet, where a family that was Spanish speaking was having dinner in a restaurant, or a lunch I think it actually was, and were screamed out of the restaurant by a hysterical woman who demanded to see their passports, told them in 4-letter words that they should get out of there and go home. Now that's not, the police were called and she was removed, but that's not the way to behave. I got a threat myself last week on the streets of Frederick. One of my staff members got a death threat for working for me. This is not a comfortable place to live at the moment. And I think all we can do is continue to talk about it, continue to try and make a difference. I've done things in my life. I founded 2 chapters of the Women's Political Caucus, for example. I have stood up for a gay friend of mine when he married his partner. I believe that by my actions, I tend to demonstrate my view on bigotry.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Gluck.
Okay, so when I finished college, Brooklyn College, I came down here to work for the Department of Defense at Carter-Rock, worked for the Applied Math Lab there. So that facility is still there. So I say that to let you know that the federal government exists. It'll always exist, I hope. What changes are administrations. This present administration, as you are all aware, is headed by a person who said Nazis are good people. That has to change. So what we need to do, my humble opinion, in order for that to change, is to get money out of politics. We should have public funds used for public elections. Only then can we make the federal government actually be have heads of government that don't do what this present head has done, and by example, as Ms. Hoeber just said, by example, the rest of us hopefully will follow. And talking about by example, I've done many demonstrations, been involved in many demonstrations here and elsewhere over the last 10 years since I've run for office. This is my 6th time running for office. About 3 years ago, there was a demonstration against the Muslim registry. Before I talk about that one, let me also say that there was one more recently to allow more refugees from Syria here in the United States. Our present federal government has chosen not to allow many, nearly as many as other Western countries have. I took part in that demonstration along with a number of other Jewish groups, Jewish individual and Jewish groups. Going back to the Muslim registry demonstration 3 years ago, between speakers and entertainment. I was standing next to a young Muslim, and between that, I spoke to him and I said, I don't understand why our people fight each other. We share the same father, Abraham. And I put out my hand and he shook it. And unbeknownst to me, some photographer took that picture. The next morning, I was looking at the net to see if that demonstration was covered. And the only place I found it covered was Daily Kos. And in there was a picture, that picture of the two of us shaking hands. So I say, I've done it by example, and you can see it by going to my website. You can pick up a piece of paper out there, and if you have a smartphone, it'll take you to 2 websites. It's a transition website that has that picture on the front page. So again, I've done it by example, and I will continue to as your representative in Congress.
Thank you. Mr. Trone?
Our family belongs to Temple B'nai Israel and also Temple Beth Ami. And through those experiences and the various threats to the Jewish way of life, the bigotry and discrimination is alive and well. And unfortunately, it's moving in a much more difficult direction. No question about it. I've tried to exercise leadership in that area. A couple of years ago, I was recognized for the Achievement Award by the Anti-Defamation League that fights bigotry and hatred all over America. We need to continue that fight. But what the real problem is leadership. We have a leadership in Washington that encourages the nastiness, the bigotry. We've seen President Trump lash out at women. We've seen President Trump lash out and not believe Dr. Ford. We've seen President Trump denigrate Muslims. We've seen President Trump separate parents from their children at the border. We've seen a total lack of leadership at the national level. I was at actually in a mosque last Friday afternoon. And when you want to see a group that's been singled out, think about the Muslims and what happened right after President Trump came into office with the Muslim travel ban. We stepped up to help folks in that community through our foundation. We've helped over 4,000 folks now that have been affected and needed legal aid from the Muslim travel ban. But that's something that America wants to do. America wants to help those that are being persecuted, because we've seen one group after another, one religion after another, folks that are white, black, or brown, Muslim, Jewish, Christian. We've seen folks called out for their beliefs. That's not the America that I signed up for. It's not the America anybody in this room signed up for. And it's certainly not the America that we want for our children. So we've got to stand firm in Congress. We need to continue with the nonprofit block grants that allow funding for mosques, religious schools, anywhere there's danger. And the danger is only increasing and is going to continue to increase while we have the divisive, ugly rhetoric that we're experiencing from the top of the pyramid in Washington. Thank you.
Thank you. So along those lines, since we've talked specifically about bias crimes, I want to talk about immigration and refugees in particular. I'm going to start with a passage from Deuteronomy. You shall not deliver unto his master an enslaved person that has escaped from his master unto you. He shall dwell with you in your midst, in the place that he shall choose within one of your gates that seems good to him. You shall not mistreat him. So beginning with that unyielding biblical injunction and continuing throughout our people's history, Jewish law and tradition has embraced the stranger and demanded that we help those in need. In fact, many of our local area synagogues, including my own synagogue where we are tonight, have been working with local refugee families to help them resettle here by finding a place to live, providing them with food, with clothes, meals, and so much more. So I want to know, what is your position on the current federal immigration policies and enforcement practices? What, if anything, should we be doing to protect our immigrants and refugees right here in our communities while also ensuring public safety and compliance with federal law. And why don't we start the opposite? We'll go with Mr. Trone, then Mr. Gluck, Ms. Hoeber, and Mr. Caldwell. And if you need me to repeat the question, I'm happy to.
We're good to go.
Okay.
There's no question. We were all immigrants at one point in time. We were Italians. We were Irish. We were different when we came here. And then America assimilated us and welcomed us, and we became the fabric of what America is. The other countries in the world have not been able to master that. They haven't figured out how to welcome and create a truly heterogeneous society, a society that values differences. People look different. As we said earlier, colors, religions. The more we can value each other, the more we can value diversity, the more we can build inclusivity, the stronger America will be. That's the America that we all want to bring back. Unfortunately, once again, President Trump in leadership is moving us in a very, very bad direction. A direction of divisiveness at the border with a wall. It's wrong. America was built on different ways of looking at problems. 40% of our Fortune 500 companies were founded by immigrants or the next generation. We need a path to citizenship for the 11 million folks that are here. We have to address this. We need more immigrants. The U.S. was taking 100,000 immigrants. President Trump cut that to 45,000. Then he cut it to 35,000. We need to help in the crisis in Syria. Yes, we need to be safe. Yes, we need to vet those immigrants. But to call them names, and the ugliness that we've seen in Washington about people that just don't look like the current administration isn't America that I signed up for. And it's not the America that we're going to have after 2020. And we've got to take back the first house in Congress. We've got to take back the House of Representatives. We need 23 votes to provide a check on President Trump. And without that, he's going to continue to gain in his arrogance, his mean-spirited approach to people, because he's lacking civility and he's lacking compassion and he's really lacking competence. Thank you.
Mr. Gluck. Can we, I know and I appreciate everybody's applause. It's just, it does take time away from the candidates, and we'd like to make sure that we can have time for all of them tonight. Thank you. Mr. Gluck.
Okay, so let me again give you a personal example. Some of you here I know and are aware of this, but I'm the son of 2 survivors, capital S survivors, a grandson of 4 who didn't survive, and 9 other close relatives along with them. I tell you that because I proudly carry, and I'll be happy to show you, a copy of my green card. I came here at the age of 16 months in 1948. In fact, Israel was born while we were on the boat. So I want to tell you about an incident. One of the things I enjoy doing, doesn't pay, we can talk about education later, I'm sure, but I enjoy subbing. I sub in MCPS and FCPS, and shortly in Allegheny County as well, in math and science high schools. I was in Frederick High School last year subbing in biology, and the class, they used Chromebooks, and they were going to look at a film, and they had to answer on paper a bunch of questions. So I got them started, and most of them started. About 1/3 of the students in the class were Hispanic, and there was a young lady who was the alpha of the group. And my instructions and their instructions were they could work in groups together. And this young lady was playing with her phone with her table mate. And I went to her and said, please put it away and get started, and she said she would. And then I went and helped others to get started. I came back, she was still looking at the phone. I said, put it away, if you need some help, I'll help you. She said, I'm okay. I went away. Finally, the third time I came, I said, look, if you don't get started, I'm going to have to take the phone away from you, which I had the right to do. And she very loudly said, so everybody could hear her, nobody takes my phone from me. So I said, well, I'm not going to take it anyway, because then I'm responsible for it. And if it breaks, I'd have to pay for it. I said, but I can get security to come and do that. And I started walking to the phone. And I thought, let me try one other thing. And I took out a copy of my green card, and I put it up on the screen. I projected it up on the screen. I said, my parents came here, they had no education, and yet they lived the American dream. They got to see their brother, their son and daughter become part of the middle class. And that happened because we had an excellent public education in Brooklyn, right through college. And I said, well, actually I prefaced putting that up by saying, this isn't meant for everybody, it's only, you'll know who it's meant for when I put it up. Then I said what I just told you. And I told them they'd be wise to take advantage of the public education they were being offered right then and there. This young lady started to do her work, finished in the time, and the rest of her compatriots did their work as well. So I tell you that as an example of how, again, how I feel about foreigners and how to integrate them into our society.
Thank you. Ready?
All right, we are a nation of immigrants. I absolutely agree with that. My mother was a first-generation immigrant, and I would argue with the premise that we learned how to integrate immigrants well. I remember my mother as a young woman being called all sorts of nasty names. I don't think we've ever integrated groups of immigrants very well, and I'm sure there are many here in the audience that could tell similar stories about their parents and grandparents. Nevertheless, it is part of our American heritage, it's part of the value that we have in this country, and I strongly believe in maintaining that. However, we're also a country of law. And part of our problem on the immigration issue is the inconsistent application of that law. We have, for example, here in Montgomery County, the efforts to turn it into a sanctuary county. In contrast, we have the approach in Frederick County to reject having it a sanctuary county. The issues of disagreement on how to handle immigration law are part of what has caused this extreme divisiveness. I think we need to revise our current immigration processes. I certainly agree with not separating children from their parents. I would be a tiger mom if somebody had tried to take my kid away from me, believe you me. But we do need to revise our visa laws. We need to use technology better to vet the people that wish to come in. We need to use technology better to track the people that come into this country and overstay their visas. We need to use our expertise to actually do things to change the immigration process, and then we will be in much better shape. We, in fact, need to secure our borders. I have worked on border security around the world. I'm currently working on a project to secure the borders in the Republic of Georgia. The one I worked on before that was Libya and Tunisia. We can, in fact, secure our borders without building a brick wall, although the brick wall in Israel seems to work very well. And I think we need to secure our borders.
Please, Amie, hold on, please, 1 second. Please let the candidates finish.
I think we need to secure our borders first, revise our laws, and then uniformly enforce them around the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Caldwell.
I have defended borders in different countries, and as I told you during my introduction, I have been an illegal immigrant in a foreign country, Amaretto's mom's country in Italy. It is very difficult to become a citizen, but if you have a United States passport, they let you hang out for as long as you like. I have been a working immigrant in Germany and other countries. So if you go trace back far enough, obviously my family are immigrants too. I'm not, I was born here. But like many of you. So I have nothing, and we, the Libertarian Party, we have nothing. Our nation's history is Immigrants have always come to this country. I will tell you, they don't treat immigrants well in any country, not just the United States of America, but almost anyone I've been in. That if you're in Germany, and one of the candidates obviously has not lived abroad very much, because some of those countries like Germany and other places where I have lived have pretty much opened up their borders and let everyone and anybody they want to come in there. Just as a matter of just a few years ago, I lived there and could see the destruction of that country because of the open borders and allowing anyone and everyone that could come in there. Amie made the comment about the wall in Israel, but in the last budget passed, they're refusing to let us build a wall here, but you and our taxpayer dollars are funding one in Syria right now. So we can't secure the borders here, but you can pay for somebody else's borders to be secured. If we can fund that, I believe we can fund here. I'm a former military man, so I understand securing things. That can be a wall or a myriad of things. I have been involved with units that fly UAVs in the Syrian border, so we can do all that. Now, one of the candidates blamed Trump that the kids were separated at the border. That is either an ignorant statement or purposely made to mislead you. That was Congress's fault. That has existed since 1996. And the Democrats and Republicans have had the control of our government long enough to correct that. They didn't because it wasn't politically profitable for them to sell you that at that time. But they will now. Every promise that has been made through this, you can go back for 40, 50 years, and it's all brought up the same way. Read it. It's almost the same things that are coming out of these candidates' mouth. And then we pass a bill where all the special interests are involved. 20 years goes by, more immigrants, nothing's done. Same thing over and over. We are just at that crossroads again. So if you want another special interest whole legislation passed by the two parties that have brought you this problem anyway, then you can cast your vote accordingly. If you would actually like it to be done in our interest, the people's interest, to not only further our country financially, then you know where you can vote. Thank you.
Thank you. So since we've talked about security, you've all sort of touched on it in some of your answers. I want to turn to the conversation then of gun violence. We've had a lot of questions that were submitted specifically related to school-related violence. The sanctity of life is fundamental to Judaism, as it is to many other faiths. As we all know, there has been an increase nationwide of school-related violence, and we've actually had it here in the state of Maryland. We've had bomb threats, we've had kids show up at schools with guns, we've had media in Annapolis. So we're continuing to see this important national conversation about gun violence. So my question to all of you, how do we prevent gun violence? What measures do you believe need to be taken at the federal level to ensure the safety of our public and private schools students? So with that, why don't we start in the middle with Ms. Hoeber, and then we'll go to Mr. Gluck, and then to Mr. Caldwell, and to Mr. Trone. So we kind of have a variety here.
We'll jump around. Okay, I totally support keeping guns out of the hands of people that have mental problems or are prone to violence. And you know, I'll again go back to a little comment on the threat I had in Frederick the other day, which has now been turned over to Sheriff Jenkins. We need to be able to report people that demonstrate that they are likely to make threats against other people. That's a major problem. And it isn't so much that we need to, lock them up or anything, but we need to make sure that those people are tagged so that they have no access to guns. We need to enforce our current background checks. We need to solve the problem of the states that today do not report the results of their background checks into the national system. There is a national system that tracks those things, and it needs to be fully complied with, and it is not complied with in many parts of the country. We need to do other things that are simple things for schools and synagogues. We need to lock the doors. I will note that both Sandy Hook and several of the other school shootings, the doors were not locked. Here they are now in Montgomery County. They are at our synagogue at B'nai Tzedek all the time, and you have a special code to get in when you wish. But you need to lock the doors, you need to enforce that. Again, there's a case where you can use better technology. Mark and I were actually visiting a company not very long ago that makes a very small device that can be put at school entrances or even synagogue entrances or mosque entrances that tracks the metal being carried through a door. This is something that would help quite a lot in many cases. In terms of gun law itself, I am a supporter of the Second Amendment, as I am for the entire Bill of Rights. On the other hand, there are some restrictions to the rights in the Bill of Rights. You are not allowed to yell fire in a crowded coliseum. You're also not allowed, in my view, to buy military weaponry. There are reasonable restrictions that can be placed here without violating the Bill of Rights, in my view. And I think we need to teach people to do practical things like revise the HIPAA laws. That's something that ought to be done in Congress. Today, because of privacy, a doctor is not allowed to report an unstable person who is making threats. If you are making a general threat that you're going to go out and shoot up a school, they cannot be reporting it today. If you make a specific threat, I'm going to go out and shoot John Doe, then they can report it. We need to change that in Congress.
Thank you. I keep wanting to ask. Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, so we have no trouble looking at research that was done overseas when it comes to medical problems. But we seem to have trouble doing that when it comes to this specific problem. If you look at charts that show the number of guns per 100 people in a country, in different countries around the world, on the x-axis, the y-axis is the number of mass murders or just killings, or suicides, any one of those three, you'll see we sit alone. Everybody else has low numbers. We have large number of guns, large numbers of suicides and murders. It's not a coincidence. We know that. Does that mean I'd like to see all guns go away? No. If you want a revolver to protect your home and your personal belongings, fine. You want to hunt deer, especially if you're going to eat them. That's fine with me as well. So, but other countries like Australia 20 years ago were fed up with this. They decided to buy back all guns of mass destruction. They did, and their numbers went down, way down. I'd like to see us at least go back to a bill that the Republicans were happy with, the Brady bill, after the attempted murder of President Reagan. After that, we decided to get rid of military, not allow military-style arms, and I think that's probably where we should be again. And I'll cede the rest of my time to whomever else wants it.
Mr. Caldwell.
Okay. It's very similar to most of the problems we face. Once again, I've secured just about everything. I've guarded schools in foreign countries, in war zones. So I've told the kids in the high school, many of them that I visited here, had the parties or Congress, or locally even, had the will to secure schools, it would have been done a long time ago. We are not talking about something that is like trying to build a colony on Saturn or something like here. It's defending something that we always do. Now you want to go into Congress, you want to go into a football game, a concert, or anything to that effect, you're going to pass through security. Pass through more security to go see Neil Diamond in concert than I did to go to the schools here in the 6th Congressional District. So I'm telling you, it's not a problem of being able to do it. Your representatives, both at the federal, state, and local levels, just have not had the will to do it. And it simply is, if you have the will, we have the resources, you go do it. The politicians haven't wanted to do it. Now they do it because we have the school shootings. And it sounds real nice to say, hey, let's do this, let's keep these people from doing this or these folks from doing that. We'll pass a common sense gun law. Well, I've been in some of these other foreign countries that I've been in. Guns are illegal in Britain. Okay, so what the criminals do is they know the people at home don't have guns. So they knock on the door and stick a gun in their face and rob them completely. So it's a political game that they're playing with you. It's another political lie to keep you supporting the status quo. When if they wanted to do it, we could have done it. I could have taken a group of 18-year-olds that I've trained in the Army, and we can secure a school anywhere in the nation if we can secure a nation itself. So this is a problem that has been basically created by the same people who want to sell you the solution, so you'll go back to them for it. As far as gun laws go, and my general one, I support the Second Amendment. Some folks have heard me say this before, but it is a quote from a famous American. The United States Constitution does not say that the government gives you and I the right to bear and keep arms. What our law of the land says is that you and I, by the fact that we exist here on this planet, have the right to keep and bear arms, and the government shall make no law to infringe upon your right. I have slept and been around, stood on top of weapons of all kinds, have slept around 100 guns loaded, 1,000 Marines with guns loaded. Guns do not kill people. People kill people. Thank you.
Mr. Trone?
I just want to say that was horrible.
Can you?
You know, I grew up on a farm, and when I was 14, my dad taught me how to hunt pheasant and rabbits. I've been around shotguns, hunting all my life. And that's not what we're talking about here. That's not what this discussion is about. This discussion is about 5, 6, 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds. It's not a political lie, as he just said. It's about little kids going to school and not coming home. Not coming home. And you know what? Locking the door of the school? Okay, fine. But that's not a solution. That's not a solution. We have to change this gun culture. There's a lot of easy things that should be done. But the PACs, the National Rifle Association, they block it. That's why we don't take PAC money. Any congressman or senator that's taking money from the NRA, you shouldn't vote for them. Don't vote for them. All they understand is losing their job. They need to lose their jobs. Yes, common sense gun safety, high capacity magazines. We need to fix assault style rifles, bump stocks, gun show loophole. All those things have to get fixed. Trigger locks. What's wrong with that? But at the end of the day, there's another tragedy. 22,000 people die of gun suicide every year. And don't tell me it's the gun's fault, it's their fault. It's because they suffer some mental illness of anxiety and depression. And the gun was available. We hadn't followed smart legislation, such as trigger locks. And those folks will never come back. But one moment they were depressed, and in one moment their lives and the lives of their families and their friends and loved ones, it all took a 180-degree turn that could never be recovered. So we've got to fix this. And it's Congress's fault that it's happened. The kids have helped lead the charge to the latest massacre. We went to the gun rally with Congressman John Delaney. We took over a dozen buses. We were all there together. And we've got to stand with the children who are leading the way. Thank you.
I'm sorry?
He mentioned me. He didn't say name, but
He didn't say your name.
Okay, I got the game. Go.
Yep. We've made, yeah, it has to be your actual name.
No
That's
worries.
why I said candidates, be careful what you say. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of foreign countries, so let's turn to a country. outside of the United States that is very near and dear to many people in this room, Israel. Recently, Israel celebrated its 70th birthday, and earlier this year, on May 14th, the United States opened its embassy in Jerusalem, enacting the U.S. policy that was set forth in a bipartisan Jerusalem Embassy Act of 1995. At the same time, the security climate in Israel and Gaza has deteriorated, with Hamas terrorists threatening the destruction of Israel. Further, the humanitarian situation in Gaza has also worsened. So I kind of have a three-part question for you. The first thing is, one, do you believe that Israel has an absolute right to defend itself from terrorist threats? Second, if so, how do you balance that with the humanitarian situation that's going on in Gaza? And then the last part, what do you see as your role in strengthening and supporting the U.S.-Israel relationship, and what can be done to combat the assault on Israel's legitimacy and sovereignty by the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement? So I know it's a long question, so I'll be a little bit lenient with the time here. We're still gonna have the 3-minute time limit, but try to keep to that. But if you go a little over, we'll be a little lenient here. So why don't we start with Mr. Gluck, since he has not gone first yet, and then we'll go to Mr. Trone, Mr. Caldwell, and then to Ms. Hoeber.
Okay.
Ready, Norma?
To continue that description of my family background, I have many cousins in Israel, and they are across the entire spectrum there. I have a cousin whose wife grew up on a kibbutz where they raised pigs when it was legal. I also have a cousin who is married to a daughter of one of the ex-chief rabbis of Israel. So you can tell that's a wide expanse. In a way, to answer the third question first, Israel absolutely has, well, I'll say that, has an absolute right to defend itself. And based on what I've just told you, I feel in any negotiation, the right of having a Jewish state in Israel is not negotiable. I say that, and now I want to talk about something that hasn't happened here in the United States for 40 years. That is, we have not been, I don't think we've been considered an honest broker in trying to mediate any kind of peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis in 40 years. And I think of the four of us at the table here, I think I'm probably the only one, based on what I just told you about my family there, and also my feelings and demonstrations here. And also, I should tell you, my wife and I were in Israel this last December to celebrate our grandson's bar mitzvah on top of Masada. We weren't there 24 hours before my family, left-sided family, took me, I was happy to go to a demonstration in Tel Aviv against the present administration in Israel. Not Israel itself, but the present administration in Israel. So I feel I've demonstrated against corruption in Israel, which, by the way, we were told while we were demonstrating that large numbers of Orthodox had demonstrated the Sunday before, and were going to demonstrate the next day against the corruption that's going on in Israel right now. Just quickly, as far as BDS is concerned, I think it's a very slippery slope when we try to tell people they can't boycott. We've seen boycotts help folks throughout the world. If you want to not boycott, that's fine. If you want to indicate why that's a problem, I think that's fine, but I think we cannot silence speech or boycotts. We'll get in trouble. One last thing, I guess I got a few seconds. We ought to be careful about this idea of my enemy's enemy is my friend. We did that with the Mujahid, let's see, whatever it is. And they've come back to fight us all over the Middle East. So we need to be careful about that as well. And again, let me just say, I think I'm the only one here who will be an honest broker. And I'll be happy to go to the Middle East with congresspeople of various religions or no religion at all.
Mr. Trone.
All right, great question. I've been over to Israel and been through the Gaza Strip, up to Ramallah, through Jerusalem to the Golan. We were just there recently with our family in February. We've spoken about this very often. We absolutely need a two-state solution, but it's hard to achieve that if we don't have a partner that we can negotiate with due to the lack of leadership on the other side. At the same time, we've got to be there to defend Israel and allow them to make their decisions autonomously, without pressure from the United States to do what's right. They're the only democracy, our only friend, our only real friend, don't count Saudi Arabia, in the Middle East. And we've got to be there for them on the $3.8 billion budget they receive to make sure they have a qualitative edge, a technology edge in the area of weapons, because they're living on the edge of disaster. So yes, we have to unequivocally support Israel, but at the same time, if they cross the line, we can be critical, for sure. But that being said, BDS is BS. I've worked with Senator Cardin on the anti-BDS bill that he and Portman put forth. I've been in the ACLU for over 20 years. The ACLU's had difficulty with that bill on some First Amendment rights. We tried to work together, and we've made good progress to move that bill forward. And now it's going to hopefully become law, because we can't allow that to continue. At the same time also, we have to keep looking at what's happened with Iran. Iran is the greatest threat. Iran has one issue: drive Israel into the sea, support Hamas, Hezbollah. So we have to be there to support Israel unequivocally. At the same time, we have to admire the Israelis' progressiveness and humanitarian nature. It doesn't get up in the newspapers. All they talk about is at the border in Gaza now, flying kites with bombs. And they talk about there's some casualties. And it's horrible that there are, because we need to help those folks in Gaza. But allowing Hamas to run roughshod, because they're not helping themselves. But right outside of Gaza, Israel has hospital facilities, free of charge. Folks that are hurt, that suffer, can be taken care of. Same thing in the Lebanon border. Same thing on the Syria border. Israel is a very humanitarian nation, but you don't read about that in the paper, because it's not that popular. It doesn't sell papers. But we need to be there to support Israel and continue to support it at a bipartisan level. It's not Democrats or Republicans, it's everybody bipartisan.
Thank you.
Could you repeat the second part of that question, please?
Sure, of course. Let me find it. The second part is, what do you see as your role in strengthening or supporting the U.S.-Israel relationship? And along those lines, what can be done to combat the assault on Israel's legitimacy and sovereignty by the boycott, divestments, and sanctions movement?
The first part of the question, does Israel have, every country has its own sovereignty to defend itself against terrorism. So that's an easy yes. The other part about the humanitarian parts, the most important thing a congressman can do to help this overall is the people. We really have to facilitate. There will never be peace in the Middle East until the people there want peace more than they want war or death or the other things that they're suffering from. Now, we can do a lot of things to facilitate that. One of the main problems in the Middle East, and this certainly with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, that we don't hold a lot of sway in these ones, is because we have been on the wrong side of history too many times in our foreign policy. A very small group of self-interested people have driven our foreign policy, not for the interest of us or even the people of those countries, but it's been driven based on corporate and special interest around the world that our foreign policy has been set by. So we have to be on the right side of it in order to have any validity with the two people that we are trying to say, hey, take our advice to negotiate this peace process, or take our advice when we say you're being inhumane to some of these folks. If we do not have the stance to stand on, or the moral ground to stand on, because we've been the way we've done everything else in the past, then those two countries aren't going to give us much credibility when trying to lead them to the peace table as well. And I agree, Iran is a massive problem. But let me remind you, the party of the person that just brought up is the one that wanted to arm Iran with a nuclear weapon. And there are many of us that would never do that in a million years. I have fought. My father has fought as a 2-time Purple Heart recipient in Vietnam. We've been fighting this country's wars for decades upon decades. And when we are at that point, when you have to have troops on the ground fighting, your foreign policy has failed. So I am the only one up here that if we have to go and defend Israel or live up to the fact that they are. My wife is also a lieutenant commander in the Navy. I am the only one up here who would send directly one of their family members into that conflict. So you can bet your bottom dollar that we will have a clear interest in doing so. But our biggest challenge in foreign policy is to be standing on the right side of history instead of the special interest side of history. Thank you.
Thank you.
Israel has an absolute right to defend itself. Every country has an absolute right to defend itself against incursions and against threats that come into it from outside. I have stood with Israel for years on this issue. I am part of the team that put together the technology that created the Iron Dome. Israel would not be nearly in as good shape today without the work that I co-sponsored when I was Deputy Undersecretary of the Army to upgrade the Patriot missile system to become the Iron Dome. I also worked with Israel on a development of an 81mm mortar, which you probably have actually used. I have worked with them on technological advances for their defense for nigh on to 30 years now. And I continue to work with the Technion, which is their university that is equivalent to MIT, on technical developments. And they send students over to MIT to do graduate research every year. And Mark and I meet with those students and talk to them about their projects and about their plans for their futures. I am a strong ally of Israel and will continue to be. I am also a very strong opponent of the Iran agreement. I published my first paper arguing against that agreement well before I decided to run for Congress. And actually our current Congressman John Delaney's support of that agreement was one of my triggers to say somebody needs to stand up and talk about this issue. I'm very strong on those things, and I believe I will continue to be. There's also the economic interest that Mark's company has a company subsidiary over in Haifa with several hundred people. We've been over there to visit that subsidiary, and I've also been there as a tourist. But we're very committed to keeping on working to keep Israel strong, to protect itself. Now on the BDS thing, like as I said earlier on discrimination and discriminatory and bigotry acts, I'm firmly opposed to that. I stand with Governor Hogan and have talked to him about what he has done to prohibit companies here in Maryland from doing business with any other companies that support BDS. As you may know, Governor Hogan has endorsed me, and this is one of the things that I find very strongly in agreement with him. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to switch directions and let's talk about healthcare. Health insurance is a very important topic here in Maryland, particularly as it relates to Medicare and Medicaid. So let's talk about what your thoughts are on how we can ensure that all Marylanders can obtain affordable health care, specifically mental health services and substance abuse treatment. So what are your plans at the federal level to help the state of Maryland? So why don't we start, we'll start with Mr. Caldwell and we'll go back down the line. Mr. Caldwell, Ms. Hoeber, Mr. Gluck, and then Mr. Trone, please.
Well, I imagine you're about to hear very diverse views on this subject. The healthcare, once again, same thing as the last couple of problems. This is a problem created by the two parties now asking you to come back to them to buy the solution to the problem as well. It's a fairly simple solution. This Medicare for all is not going to work. There is no silver bullet answer to this question, everyone. And I think everybody kind of intuitively knows that. It's going to be a strategy of opening up our system back to a market-based health system, because the main problem with the healthcare is that it's a resource that's not based on what you and I can afford to pay for it. It's based on what third parties can pay for it that have a lot more money than you and I do. This is a very long topic, but in the simplistic, most simplistic part of it, the idea that to take anything this large, anything this economic and this large is affected by your choice and my choice of how we choose to spend our money. Any plan that takes the choice or your power or our power away from us, millions, hundreds of millions of people, and consolidates it down into the hands of a few bureaucrats who say that they're the experts on everything, is absolutely ludicrous and will never ever solve the problem. Now, the Medicare at all, we're going to have to keep. I have family members. You know, my mother-in-law that lives with us, my mom, I have family members that are directly affected by these things. We can't, you know, this makes a big deal. I don't know that the price of healthcare for the millionaires in this race makes that much difference, because are they under the same healthcare that you and I are? Actually, Congress itself, the healthcare law that Congress passed was so wonderful and so amazing, they didn't even want to apply it to themselves or their staffs or their families. So do not buy into a second. The government selling you this program, the more power we give away, the less this resource will be available to us, and the more it will cost. And that is going to affect everything from Medicare to anything involved with the healthcare services. Any resource that exists on the face of this planet does not exist in enough amount to go around to satisfy an inexhaustible demand. We either decide to do that based on our choices, or we give it to some of the bureaucrats, like some of them up here that are running for office, and let them decide. What do they know better than you and I about our health care? Who is going to take care of your health care better than you or some DC bureaucrats? Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. There's actually a lot I agree with in that. But let me say that the real problem with healthcare is that we can't afford it. And not only that, we don't know what it is that we can't afford. The first thing I would do is I would insist on price transparency. That's the key thing that will make a difference. When you go to the doctor and he orders test X, you have no idea what you are going to pay for it. You may actually be able to find out what the doctor is going to charge for it, but then there are negotiations with the various insurance companies, there's deductibles, blah, blah, blah. You have no idea what you are actually going to pay until you actually get a bill. So you have no grounds on which to make a judgment, and you have no grounds to do price shopping or any competitive analysis here. That's the first thing that I think needs to change. We need to demand on price transparency. We also need to do a number of other things. We need insurance company reform. They shouldn't be profit-making bodies, in my view. They shouldn't be making profits out of things that we don't know what we're paying for. We need to do generic drugs. We need to do research on the expensive diseases. Alzheimer's has now cost us a total of $259 billion in this country. We need to actually also do tort reform so that we don't have the high insurance premiums. My sister's a surgeon. She pays an enormous amount every year on her liability insurance. And that's because there are occasional awards of enormous amounts to people who have suffered at the hands of doctors. And certainly awards are justifiable, but some of them get totally out of hand. Let me segue just for a moment into the opioid addiction problem. And, you know, I understand that one of our candidates up here has lost a nephew. Well, I lost a family member last week, and so I need to be careful here on what I can, how calm I can stay on this issue. What I would do as a congressperson here is I would do local grants to communities to develop their own programs. I have seen some splendid local rehab facilities out in District 6. There's one here in Montgomery County that is relatively new and superb. There are 2 in Frederick. There are 2 in Cumberland. They've all been tailored based on local assets and local needs. That's what I would send grant money to get those started. Some of them have been started with federal money. Some of them have been started with state money. But the local communities do it best.
Thank you.
Okay, so for the last 10 years, I'm an IT person, and I've actually worked on CMS systems and ACA. In fact, I was doing it today before coming here, and I'll have to do it tomorrow as well. I got a note from one of my coworkers. The first day I worked on, we helped develop a new accounting system for CMS, Medicare and Medicaid, several years back. And it was unusual because it was gigantic and it was successful. And the very first day I was involved, I went to the person who was in charge of taking in claims information. So that they were coming from 50 different sites, 50 different contractors, and they were getting, I don't know, 1 million a day, let's say, to make it round numbers. And I asked this person who was in charge of the front end, I said, how difficult would it be, instead of getting this information from 50 places, 1 million each, getting it from 5 million places at 1,000 each, or whatever that works out to? And he said, not very difficult. I said, good, because someday we're going to have universal health care, and the single payer will be Uncle Sam. And it is coming. It is absolutely coming. I have no doubt about it. Okay, so Medicare for all. And the reason I said, I mentioned before that we have other countries who have research, and we're the only Western country that doesn't have a Medicare for all type, or at least a nonprofit. I think Switzerland has insurance companies, but they're all nonprofit. Right? So while I was running today, I was listening to a podcast, and I heard that we're number 43 in life expectancy. 43. There are only 34 OECD countries, Western countries. We're 43. That's incredible. We shouldn't be there. And the only reason we're there is because we consider medical care a privilege, not a right. And it should be a right for every citizen in this country, as it is for most of the other Western countries. All right, my wife, who's here today, is a retired MCPS middle school math teacher. While she was still teaching, before we went under Medicare ourselves, we're a little older now. For 10 years, the head of the insurance company that insured us got total compensation. I'll let you guys take a second here of my 3 minutes or a couple of seconds to think of what his total compensation was as far as salary and stock options. Take a wild guess. 10 years, what was his total amount? Okay, whatever you thought, think $1.78 billion in 10 years. 1.78 billion. Now, he had to give back $500 million because of some funny things they did with dates on his stock options, but that's still 1.28 billion. All right, that's it for me.
Mr. Trone.
Healthcare is a basic human right, and we have to keep pushing until we get there. Some of our opponents would like to take away healthcare for pre-existing conditions. That's wrong. Some of our opponents would like to take away funding for Planned Parenthood. That's wrong. President Obama moved us in a good direction with an imperfect plan. Did you ever get anything right the first time you did it? That was really complicated, really difficult. We never get it right the first time. But you know what? 21 more million Americans had health care, and that was a pretty daggone good day. But unfortunately, the Trump administration is working to tear that down. But who else is there working to tear it down? The pharmaceutical lobby. #1 PAC in the last 20 years. Over $4 billion they wrote. They make the NRA look poor. $4 billion they've written to Congress. You wonder why we don't have the ability to negotiate for lower prescription prices in the ACA. Well, there's the answer. Opioids, I think we're all in agreement. It's the #1 tragedy in America, the most important campaign issue of this election. I talk about it every single event. I lost a nephew, others on a stage have lost folks. Everybody in this room has probably lost folks or knows folks. 72,000 people this year. Last year died. 64,000 the year before. It's up 14% this year in Maryland. We need a national program to fix it. This is not local. This is national. We need a combination of the federal government, the state government, yes, the local government, business, philanthropy, and moms and dads to all work together to help turn this unmitigated disaster around. There's been a bill proposed in Congress, $100 billion over 10 years. We put together a 12-point plan. I'm a bit of a policy wonk. I admit it. I love policy. I love reading about both sides of an issue so we can think about it and be informed and make good decisions. But our plan is very similar to what's happening right now with Senator Warren and Congressman Elijah Cummings in Baltimore. But it's going to take a decade. The $8.5 billion that was just signed by President Trump is a small start. But you don't fix a problem that's been decades in the making, led by the pharmaceutical industry, with one short, one-year program. And investment in NIH, that's the last piece. We got to double down and think about the next generation. Thank you.
So I want to make sure that we're sticking to time. We actually did not get anybody to submit a question on this, but I'm going to take a little bit of a moderator's privilege here because I think it is something that is on a lot of people's minds, and it's a conversation that I have daily with people. We've talked a lot of different topics: Israel, gun violence, healthcare, immigration, school violence. One of you is going to be in Congress. There's the Republicans, there's Democrats, there's independents, there could be Libertarian, a Green Party. There's people from all sides. So this is a question on bipartisanship. What experience do you think that you have that will give you the skills you need to end the gridlock that we're seeing in Washington? What strategies are you going to use? There's a lot of different opinions on all of the issues that have been talked about. Nothing will get done without bipartisanship. So how do you realistically think you're going to meet the needs of this very diverse community, and we are extremely diverse in Montgomery County, without alienating any particular groups? So why don't we start, we'll go down this way. We'll start with Mr. Trone, Mr. Gluck, Ms. Hoeber, and then Mr. Caldwell.
There's no question. I think this is perhaps opioids is the most important issue because every day people are dying. But the solution is without question America figuring out how to work together. I mean, have you ever seen a bigger circus than we have right now in Congress? And a total circus, the big tent of the White House. A government operating by tweets. A government attacking each other. The partisanship is abhorrent. It is so wrong. In business, can you imagine if you attacked someone you wanted to work with to get something done, then expect actually to make progress? Could never happen. So we talk about this, I talk about this at every single event. How we create civility and look at what can unite us, because so much can unite us. Opioids, medical research, community college, pre-K, all the things we need to do to move our country in a better direction. So much unites us. But instead, all we focus on is the divisiveness and the ugliness of name calling. So we've got to figure out how to work together. And as a CEO, that's what you do. You work with your team. You work with your suppliers, because you can't rule by fiat. You work through others. The only way things get done is get buy-in. Paint the vision, show the roadmap, and then work to get the answers and get into the details. I love details. It's a good thing. But right now, we've got to pull America together, and we also got to pull local government to be tied in with state government, to be tied in with the federal government. Because too often, the federal government sits there by itself on a perch, and we don't come down and help and get involved in the statewide issues. And listen and learn. That's what traveling the district has all been about. Listening to folks from Cumberland, to Oakland, to Hagerstown, to Gaithersburg, to understand their problems. And that's what we do in business. We listen to our team members in Seattle, San Francisco, Boston, or Miami. We listen to the problems, come up with solutions, and then execute. But America can be so much better than what we see right now. And we've got to make that happen. The people see it, but the leaders, they're out to lunch. Thank you.
Let's look at the irony of the question as you posed it. You pointed to us and said Libertarian, Republican, Green, Democrat, and then you said several times we have to be bipartisan. Well, bipartisan means Democrat and Republican. It doesn't include the two of us. In fact, oddly today in the Washington Post, who endorsed Mr. Trone, and I say Mr. Trone, so now you can answer back.
It was a positive comment.
Okay. They endorsed Mr. Trone. If you go back and look at it, you'll see there was no mention whatsoever of a Green running or a Libertarian running. So our corporate news, whether it be the papers or cable or whatever, they just totally disregard us, absolutely disregard us. I've been running, this is my 6th time running, 10 years now, offering you, the voters, a progressive choice. If I'm elected, I've said this elsewhere in the other 2 forums, I'll say it tomorrow at 6 o'clock up in Hagerstown as well, there will be unaffiliated Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, and Greens on my staff. Why? Because I want you to be able to feel comfortable talking to my staff, and I also don't want yes people on my staff. I want them to tell me what's wrong with the tack I'm taking, if there's something wrong. They'll have to understand that I have the final say, be sure of that, but I will want them to tell me what they feel. Okay, so I still have a little time left, so let me talk about RCV, ranked choice voting. You guys deserve more and better candidates than you're getting, better than me even. And I think I'm pretty good. I hope you think so too. Ranked choice voting means you get to vote for more than one person. In the primaries, and by the way, you have to win by a majority. So that means you're all going to be relatively happy. It may not be your first choice, but it may be your second or third. And so you'll be relatively happy more often than you are now. And as an example, in the Democratic primary this year, 60% of the voters, I suspect, were unhappy with the results because they voted for someone other than the winner. So that's one thing I'd like to see. That would help also, the other thing I'd like to see is get rid of gerrymandering. So you guys can actually choose your elected officials instead of them choosing you. That's it.
I will amend multi-partisanship.
It's called nonpartisan. Thank you.
Well, it is multi-partisanship. That's exactly right. And I think I come to this with the right approach. I have run organizations of several thousand people. In the Army, I had numerous people that worked for me in different areas and in different topics and with different priorities. And it was my job, and I did it well, to bring them all together and find common ground and find what we did with our budget and move forward. And we always did that well. I did that for years with 41 laboratories and essentially $8 billion a year in funding. I believe in nonpartisanship. I believe in bipartisanship. I believe in cooperation, empathy, and civility. And I have run on that platform from the very beginning of 4 years ago. I'm glad other people have gotten to that point. My key loyalty is to my district. I will put district ahead of party. I will put district interests ahead of everything else. I feel there are 3 jobs for a congressperson. The first is you make decisions on national issues. And I will say, by the way, that the criticisms that were raised in terms of pre-existing conditions and Planned Parenthood are absolutely incorrect, and you can see my website for my statements on those. But let's go back to the 3 jobs. You make decisions on national issues. The other 2 functions of a congressperson are to represent the views of your district, and that's an interesting trick in this district because it isn't just Montgomery County. It goes all the way out through Deep Creek Lake, and the cultures in the different areas are very different. But the third is to help your district. I know every pothole that needs to be repaired in Garrett County. I know the 3 bridges in Cumberland, not Cumberland County, but rather Cumberland City, that are falling down. I know the I-81 intersections that are a problem. I know the 85 and 15 route intersections that are currently being fixed under Governor Hogan's plan. I will work with my district. I will be out in the district talking to the people every day, just like I am today, and listening to what they want and what their needs are. That's my view of how to be multi-partisan, is to be responsive to your constituents.
This is an easy one for us because we don't have to play these games that they normally have to play in the parties. I can tell you just by nature, if you're running as a libertarian, I can't speak for a Green Party, but I don't have a choir to go preach to everywhere, so we steal a little bit of theirs that doesn't like them. And I get invited to Republican events, Democrat events, and let's be honest about what the definition for us bipartisan means. That means both parties get together and take money out of my pocket at the same time. They've actually, because the real reason that you have this we have this problem is because of the special interest, that $34.6 billion that both of these parties have taken in the last 10 years. Those special interests, that when you get legislation that comes down, it isn't your or my interests that are thought about first. They have to go through the list of people that have given all this money. The Democrat Party has to do that, and the Republicans have to do their side as well. Now, when they get bipartisan, a lot of times those special interests line up so they can fill their pockets at the same times before they get to ours. But it is stuck by the special interest. That's where this divide comes from, and the need to divide you and me. Like I said before, I have agreed to put people from all parties in. It doesn't matter to me what party you're from. But I'll say I will join with the 8th Congressional District and the bipartisan part already. Because the 8th District didn't need one of the candidates running in this district, and they didn't even want them when they live in. So I say we should have a bipartisan effort in the 6th to do the same exact thing. Thank you very much.
So it's coming on, it's 8:40, so to make sure that I stick to the time limit and get everybody out of here at 9 p.m., we're going to move to closing statements. As closing statements, you're going to have 2 minutes instead of the 3 minutes that we started with. I want to ask you a question to just sort of set the stage for you to consider in your closing statement. If you could answer what sets you apart from your opponents, and why should members of, we're here for the JCRC, members of the Jewish community, but you can expand beyond that, obviously, why should members of this community of District 6 vote for you? And to remind everybody of the order, Ms. Hoeber will go first, then Mr. Gluck, Mr. Caldwell, and then Mr. Trone, and you will have 2 minutes for your closing statements. Ready? Okay, Ms. Hoeber, thank you.
Thank you. Marketing slogans are one thing, facts are another. Fact one, I am not trying to buy this election, I'm trying to earn this election. Fact two, don't take away my time. What I'm talking about here is what I'm offering. I'm offering to this constituency my loyalty, I'm offering my commitment, I'm offering my integrity. That's something that's rare in today's world, and I've never been convicted of a violation. I'm offering my competence. I have experience in the federal government, and I will apply that experience to helping my district. I offer independence. I have fought against presidents of both parties when I disagreed with what they've done. I will continue to stand up for what I believe and for what I believe is best for my district. I offer my commitment to compassion and civility. As I said, I have run on that platform for 4 years, and I intend to continue. And beyond that, I offer my promise to you all that I will do the best possible job I can to both represent you and help you every day. We know that Vangelis is too extreme for this state. I think the whole extreme progressive platform is too extreme for this state. And I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Okay, I didn't get a chance to tell you my campaign slogan. I'm in the process of trying to actually copyright it or register it, I guess. And it is, make America good again, this time for everyone. This time for everyone, right? Okay, so I think what I'd ask all of you to do, I've already told you that, as you should be well aware, that the Democratic primary, in the Democratic primary, 60% of the voters voted for someone other than the winner. On the basis of that, and I'll put this out, I don't have enough time to describe it all. I'll put it out if you guys want to look. Go to my Facebook page. I'll tweet it out also later tonight. I came up with a model that actually has me winning with 38.5% of the vote, and it's based primarily, and I know you're going to laugh at me and think it's far-fetched, but it's based primarily on the fact that there are 60% of the Democrats in CD6 are unsatisfied with the choice that was made. I hope that that you will consider me. I also should let you know that there are Green Party members in virtually every Western, or not only Western, but other national legislatures around the world. It's about time we had one here in the United States. And I'm urging you to please make sure that that happens here in CD6 first, before it happens in California. Finally, I'd like to leave you with this question. Who would you rather have represent you? A Democrat who spreads green, or a green who spreads democracy?
Not bad, not bad.
Mr. Caldwell.
I had to give that one a second to sink into everybody. Wow. Okay. This one's pretty easy one for me. What sets me apart from these other candidates? So one of the things I've been trying to kind of communicate to you, we have every issue that we have involved, there are special interests involved in it from A to Z. Now, one of the problems besides the special interest in that is our representatives are not very representative of the district. And I'm sorry, this neighborhood from outside the district that would like to represent us in the district does not represent our district. Now that is by itself not a disqualifying factor, I will admit. But to put this into some perspective for you, 3 members of that neighborhood have the excess income to have spent $40 million in the last 2 elections. To give you some idea to really drive that home to you, if you took an average yearly income of $75,000 a year, and do keep in mind roughly 2015 stats say there's about 900,000 of us in the 6th Congressional District. And most of you know that a $75,000 average income is much higher than the US average. But if you use that, it would take over 700,000 of us to come up with the money to spend that these 3 individuals have spent in just the 2 elections. Now, I don't know about you, but that isn't very representative of everybody I live around. I'm trying to give you honest representation that isn't connected to anyone that you own directly. If there is a libertarian in Congress, the 2 parties have to make room for us. I don't have to play any games to get on any committees. All I have to do is choose, because they have to do that. We can have a party leadership. There is no party. You want to see the party leadership that comes in? Just look right behind me. There's the ninja team that swings into Congress if I get elected. It's your party. It's our country. It's your opportunity to take it back. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Trone.
This is the most important election we've had probably in our lifetime. The country is moving in a very bad direction, a very wrong direction, a direction that lacks civility, lacks compassion, and certainly lacks competence. So we need to take our country back. My background has been getting things done. I'm here for the right reasons. I'm here to make a difference. I'm here to drive change. I've been a change agent all my life. That's what I do. I work with folks, we pull people together, and we accomplish our mission. So what do we want to get done, and how are we going to do it? You got to start with a Trump tax cut, $1.9 trillion for the top 1%. Wrong. We need to repeal it. All it drove was more dividends, more stock buybacks, and a higher stock market for that same top 1%. We ought to think about free community college and technical school so we have plumbers, electricians. It costs $60 billion a year. We can make that happen. We ought to talk about preschool for everybody, not 41% what we have here in Maryland. To get that across the country, $16 billion. And we ought to think about the opioids. We talked about it earlier. It's a $100 billion price tag over 10 years. Those 3 things can be paid with one simple change, eliminating the carried interest loophole. Provides $180 billion over 10 years for the Wall Street financiers. And we should put in the Buffett rule. If you make over $1 million, you pay 30%. That's that. Good idea. That would provide over $500 billion in the next 10 years, and we could double NIH spending, which is down 11.2% in the last 15 years. So let's get a program for the next generation. Let's give Americans the America they deserve for our kids and their kids. Thank you.
Before we finish, I'd like to have Ron Halber, the JCRC's Executive Director, come up and give some closing statements. From myself, thank you to all of the candidates for being here tonight. No, that doesn't work. Use that or this. It doesn't work.
I should turn it on.
I think we gave C-SPAN a good show tonight, huh? Everybody, first of all, I wanted to thank all of you for coming here this evening. One of the greatest things that you can be as a citizen is an active participant in our nation's own democracy. Remember, people in our nation's history have fought and died for the right that you are actually experiencing here today, which is the ability to go ahead and to participate and to decide who are going to be our nation's decision makers. So first of all, I want to thank all the candidates for being here. I know you've done several of these, and I appreciate your making us the beneficiary of your activism and energy, and please give them all a round of applause. I'd like to thank Meredith. I'd like to thank Meredith. I don't need this. I'd like to thank Meredith for doing a great job, and can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. I'd like to thank Meredith for doing an awesome job hosting, and I also want to thank Nirma, our timekeeper, for keeping everybody here straight. I want to thank Shari Torah for hosting us. Now, I would be neglectful if I didn't also recognize the fact that there are two other rabbis from local synagogues in this room. So this could also be a synagogue membership drive meeting for those of you who are unaffiliated. We have Rabbi Reitchik over there from Chabad. We have Rabbi Arian from Kehilat Shalom. We have Rabbi Blumenthal. JCRC takes no position on what synagogue you belong to, but you should belong. That we will say. I also want to go ahead and say that one of the things that our agency prides itself is that in an era of polarization and in discord, that we still are able to come together as a community in a civil way and discuss the issues of concern. What you saw tonight, the civility, the ability to discuss, the ability to disagree without getting disagreeable, is the hallmark of what we need to return to in our society, and to make sure that we're all, as a community, able to exchange differences in a way that brings out the best in us, that brings out our better angels. Thank you. So again, early voting is starting. November 6th is go vote. I'll be one of the people who say, if you don't vote, please don't call me and complain. I'm not interested. On November 29th, the JCRC will have its Schmooze and Nosh event, which is our annual legislative breakfast, which we're expecting to get between 300 and 400 people, including all of our new lawmakers, because those who are elected will not yet have been sworn in yet, but our veteran elected officials will still be in, so it'll be a great environment for you to come. Many of our synagogues are sponsoring tables, so call your rabbis and ask them if you'd like to join them and sit with your synagogue, or if you're not affiliated with a synagogue, come on your own as a guest. It's relatively inexpensive, and we invite all our federal, state, and local. So you'll have senators and congressmen and the governor, lieutenant governor, the comptroller, and it's a very big event, and it's become bigger every year. And plus, Meredith moderates it, so you know it's going to go well. February 2019, we will have our advocacy day. It's when we pack a couple buses and we go up to speak with our state legislators and tell them what's on our mind. And then, not to be outdone, in April of 2019, we will meet with our new county council, which at least 4 will turn over in this election. So remember, we have at least a third of Maryland's state representation to Annapolis that's going to turn over this session. And a minimum of 4 of the, and the county executive, of course, is we have a new county executive. So this is a chance. This is a very rare time brought about by the fact that we have term limits on the ballots, which forced a lot of these to go. So this is an opportunity to determine who will be, because incumbency is a very secure thing, and the chances are usually incumbents often win a re-election, and it's not that often that you in the community have an opportunity to truly vote and to make a change for those in office. So now's your opportunity. Don't waste it. Let me please conclude by saying There are many, many ways to get actively involved in the JCRC of Greater Washington, from our government and legislative relations, from our activism on Israel, to our commitment to interfaith work, our effort on social justice, to our work in the public schools, to combating anti-Semitism and bigotry, to securing the Jewish community. And I invite you to join with us and to be a participant. It'll be a great ride. Thank you very much. Good evening.